Welcome to this explainer on Hartsmere. We're jumping right into 1875, right to the towering gates of this massive red brick mansion with all those clustered chimneys. From the outside, pure theater. The Ashworth family used Hartsmere to project total wealth, status, and just absolute control. But as we're going to see, the very bones of this building were designed for something else entirely. Deep, systemic concealment. It is literally a physical map of Victorian social hierarchies baked right into the wood and stone.
So, take a look at the very top of the house. You know how the lower floors would be blazing with glittering chandeliers? Well, those topmost window panes always stayed completely dark. Why? Because this grand house was basically a machine, an incredibly elaborate, engineered engine of back-breaking labor and desperate concealment, just humming along quietly right over the heads of polite society.
Let's actually go inside, and we're not starting at the grand entrance. We're starting at the Green Baize Door. In a Victorian home, this wasn't just some regular door. It was a strict, almost impenetrable border wall. Baize is this super thick, felt-like fabric, and they used it for one very specific reason, to literally muffle the sounds of the servants. It was the physical dividing line keeping two completely different worlds from ever bleeding into one another.
On one side of that muffled door, you've got the family's universe. We're talking silk-hung drawing rooms, blazing hearths, pure opulence. But on the other side, a total jarring contrast. You step into this labyrinth of cold stone stairs and bare, echoing floorboards. This was the territory of an invisible army of servants. People expected to grind away from before dawn until well past midnight, completely out of sight.
And here's where the architecture itself gets incredibly ruthless. It actively prioritized the family at everyone else's expense. Get this, Victorian engineers actually sat down and calculated the unheated space at the very top of the stairs to serve as a thermal buffer. Its entire purpose was just to trap the family's warmth down below. So the building didn't just separate the classes, it literally siphoned comfort away from the margins to insulate the wealthy folks in the center.
But things get so much darker at the very top of those freezing stairs. Up there, you'd find what was chillingly called a disappointments room. And the single most horrifying detail? This sequestered room had a heavy iron deadbolt, but it was only on the outside. Wealthy Victorian families essentially built these domestic prisons to lock away disabled children or any other scandalous secret, ruthlessly protecting their perfect, unblemished image from high society.
Historical records actually tie this specific room to the memory of a hypothetical girl we'll call Clara. So, who was she? Well, she could have been any number of things society deemed unacceptable back then. She might have simply been an illegitimate child, literally locked away in the freezing dark just so her father wouldn't jeopardize his fragile social climbing.
Or say Clara suffered from a familial psychiatric illness, maybe something that caused violent physical movements. Her isolation is exactly what inspired that famous literary trope, right? The woman in the attic from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre? We think of that as Gothic fiction today, but it was a brutal, everyday reality for anyone whose condition embarrassed a family trying to move up in the world.
You have to remember how tragically limited medical understanding was at the time. Conditions like Huntington's disease, which causes involuntary movements and cognitive decline, they just weren't recognized. We're talking about an era that had zero vocabulary or empathy for these conditions. They broadly and cruelly just dismissed these hidden people as, and this is a direct quote from the era, idiots and maniacs. For a wealthy family, the easiest fix wasn't medicine. It was architecture. Just build a room and hide them.
And Clara's hidden presence up in those rafters? It really echoes a much wider societal horror happening at the exact same time, the baby farming industry. Out in the city, infants were literally commodified for profit. They were sent off to foster homes and often neglected to death, deliberately hidden from the social police of the era's harsh welfare system, the poor law. So whether you were inside a grand mansion or out in the grimy city streets, this entire era was obsessed with hiding its most vulnerable people.
It exposes this massive, systemic hypocrisy. When the public found out about these baby farming tragedies, society generally saw the desperate mothers as victims of poverty, while the baby farmers were painted as absolute monsters. But here's the thing, the underlying class divisions and societal judgments that created that awful market were the exact same forces baked into the brick and mortar of Hartsmere. The hidden rooms, the servant labyrinths, it's all the same system.
Fast forward to today, and you can actually stand right there in the mute passages of Hartsmere. The grand house is still standing, but all that vibrant, painful life it held, it's completely vanished. The servant bells have finally stopped ringing. The massive kitchen range is totally stone cold, and that freezing buffer at the top of the stairs isn't guarding anyone's fragile reputation anymore.
All those fierce yells and desperate moments from the past have faded into what's been perfectly described as the particular peace that comes from standing at the far end of a story. It's actually a really profound reminder. Even the most elaborate, structurally reinforced machine of labor and concealment is eventually forgiven by time. All those human strivings, all those dark secrets, they all eventually come to an end.
It's easy to look at the Green Baize Door, or the Disappointments Room, as just relics from a cruel, bygone era, right? But as we wrap up this explainer and leave Hartsmere behind, we really have to look at the world we're building today. We've got to ask ourselves, what modern disappointments might our own architecture, our own city planning, and our own social structures be silently hiding right now?